All right, so this panel is on entertainment's role in shaping policy. And we have moderating this panel the chair of the Muslim Public Affairs Council, who actually is a former director. She was a director of our Washington, D.C. office, and she came out of Arkansas, Clinton land. And yeah, you're welcome. Arkansas, Ohio, they're all, we're just giving love out today. And, there's a saying at MPAC that, people who leave MPAC end up becoming board members. They become my boss. And so Sophia is now my boss. She was DC director first. So we thank her for her work. In all seriousness, she's one of the most impactful people in Washington, D.C. from the Muslim community. She's now is working for a firm that guides people on navigating on how to deal with this Trump administration. She's worked on religious freedom. She's worked at the Senate Foreign Relations. So there's not a better person to talk about policy than our current chairperson, Sophia Ghori.
Thank you. Thank you, Salam. It's so lovely to be here. So MPAC was my first job out of law school. Salam was the first person I interviewed with. I was just saying, I think I was really dumb in that interview. But it's still the best job I've ever had. And I've loved working with MPAC. Once you're at MPAC, you never leave. I wanted to just kind of start and say, when I was at MPAC and when I was growing up as a Muslim in Arkansas, it was unheard of to have a space like this, to be in a space like this. And so this is just, I'm awestruck. I'm just so amazed that we're here and that we're all here together in the Muslim house during the Sundance Film Festival. So I just want to thank Sue and Salam and MPAC and the whole organization for everything that they've done and how far we've come to be able to facilitate and host a space like this. So this is just amazing. I just wanted to start a little bit about, and I want to turn to the panelists, which I'm so excited for this conversation, about sort of why I came to MPAC. And as many of you in this room likely are, I'm a product of sort of a post-9/11 world as an American Muslim. I was a senior in college when 9/11 happened and decided to take the LSAT and went to law school and then worked for the Muslim American community after law school for MPAC on post-9/11 civil rights issues. That was my first job, and it sort of launched my career in a variety of ways. I went and worked in the Obama administration and on the Hill and have worked at the intersection of policy issues, foreign policy, domestic policy issues for the last 20 years. But that is the moment that launched my career, and that is the moment why I went into doing what I do and why I knock on the doors of DOJ and members of Congress to help shape better policies for our communities and for in the work that I do as well for our clients. But it's been sort of one of the drivers of why I'm here. So as we start this conversation today with the panelists, I want to turn to sort of, and as I'm playing Oprah in this conversation, I love playing Oprah. I want to start with the panelists today. We've got Tariq Al-Baba, who's a Los Angeles-based filmmaker and made his first feature documentary debut with 36 Seconds, Portrait of a Hate Crime, on the Chapel Hill murders. And if you have not seen this film, it is one of the most amazing, profound, beautiful films that I have ever seen. So it is our story. I cried. I am now motivated to go change something in Washington. I was nauseous. It was all the feelings that one should feel when you watch a film. So Tariq, you are phenomenal.
Thank you.
I also want to thank Joy for being here. Joy Reid, who is the host of MSNBC's The Readout. You are an icon for women of color who look for someone who looks like us on TV. And so I just want to thank you for all the struggles you've probably... Sorry, I'm like getting really emo. I'm like getting real emo here. But I just want to thank you for everything that you've done. I want to thank Samia Khan Bambra, who's an award-winning filmmaker, producer, and thought leader. She's a 2024 Sundance and Doris Duke Fellow. So, woo! Thank you for being here. And she's in production on her first feature film, The Banker's Daughter. So we want to hear all about it. But my first question to all of you is, what brought you to filmmaking? What brought you to journalism? Like, dig deep into that young Joy, that young Tariq, that young Samia, that brought you to the work that you do and where we are today.
Well, I first want to say thank you, Safia, and I want to also thank MPAC, Habib, Salam, Lubna, who's been keeping me on point and what I'm doing, and the phenomenal Sue, who is indefatigable and amazing, and also my friend Nayera Hawk, who is the person who actually got me the invite and actually is the person who made all of this happen. So I want to thank her as well. I don't see her. She's here somewhere. But so I just want to thank you all for having me. This has been really, really incredible. This is my first Sundance, and what an entry. And I really enjoyed the previous panels as well. So what I'll say is that my friend Dean Obadallah said that I had to say this part. So he wants me to explain why I am a play cousin of the Muslim community. So my play cousin's backstory is that my mother's grandmother was a Fulani Muslim from Ghana, who was taken as a 7-year-old with her mom and enslaved in Guyana. And she grew up and married another Fulani Muslim from Ghana, and the two of them either converted or were converted from Islam to Christianity. So that is my play cousin background, and that is my mom's side. And I grew up with a mother who was very much a contrarian, a Carter girl, a liberal, and an estranged father who was mostly a phone father, who was a Congolese, but went to high school in and worked in the mining industry in South Africa. So we didn't have much to talk about because he was a horrible father. But so what we would do is we would talk about politics, and our family was very political. And so I grew up really understanding and taking in the notion of apartheid. And it was really a part of the story of what we learned just as young people. And so I think it was that having those parents that caused me in 6th grade, I'm aging myself a little bit, to become really fascinated by what was happening in Iran, the hostage crisis in Iran. I got obsessed with it. And my mom let me stay up and watch what became a show called Nightline. And I watched it every night. It's how I got to know who Bibi Netanyahu was, who was a commentator frequently on Nightline. And I saw his really toxic views, and really he would debate Hanan Ashrawi and just get destroyed, and I was like, that lady should be, the president of of Palestine. Like, she's amazing. And so I got interested in that story, but also just had a heart for the issue of the Palestinian people just as a kid, because it tied so much for me to the stories of apartheid. And then and of course, President Carter, Jimmy Carter, referred to it that way. And of course, since we were Carter kids, I just sort of I had a heart for this story. And then as a journalist, when I sort of fell into working in news, I didn't go to school for news. Similar to the stories before, my mother said, you can be anything you want as long as it's a doctor, lawyer, or an architect. But she unfortunately passed away before I went to Harvard. I went in as a pre-med and came out as a film major. So I came out as a documentary film major. And actually, my husband and I are working on a documentary right now on the assassination of Medgar Evers. So I'm a storyteller by heart, but have worked in media. And the sort of pivot point for me on the way I sort of view the news world is I was working for a local NBC affiliate when the Iraq War broke out. And the reaction of the media writ large to the war, to me, was so horrifying. It was so jingoistic. It was selling, from the New York Times to TV News, was selling a lie, very willingly and eagerly with a flag pin on. And I called Jason, my long-suffering husband, as I've quit more than a few jobs. And I said, I can't do this. When the Moabs were dropped on Baghdad, and the reaction was excitement rather than horror. And so I thought I was out of news, and I came back in because I wound up working for something called thegrio.com, which is a black-facing news outlet that David Wilson founded. It was owned at that time by NBC, and it pulled me back in. And then, of course, Chris Matthews kept booking me, so I ended up at MSNBC again, so I got yanked back in as everybody's fill-in. So that's kind of my short story, but the stories of this region, just keep sort of playing a role in my journey.
They're pulling you back.
It's probably my mom's great-grandma. Her name was Wabusia. So I think Wabusia just keeps on leading me back to my play cousins.
Your play cousins, I love that, Joy.
Hi, good morning. This is just so cool to be here. I was actually really emotional this morning looking around because two decades ago when I got into the industry, there was nothing like this. It was more like, yo, change your name. Don't tell anybody you're Muslim. You're not Palestinian. You're David. You know what I mean? So we've come a long way, and it's so cool. Thank you, MPAC. Thank you, Doris Duke. Thank you all for being here. My journey started pretty early. I was infatuated with filmmaking. There were two films really that changed my life. Malcolm X, seeing it at a young age. I was just, it was such a powerful film, but also the civil rights movement and how the struggle and how much African Americans had to go through and are still going through. I just gravitated towards it. And to see Muslim representation on the screen, it was just profound. And then the other film was Braveheart. And I was so young when I saw it, and I probably shouldn't have been in the theater. I don't know how the hell I got in, actually. But I just didn't blink. I mean, it was just so moving and so cinematic. And now as a 40-year-old, I'm starting to put all the pieces together. It is because I'm half Lebanese, because I'm half Palestinian, because it's, the generational trauma, like it's like, oh, okay, I understand now. And I understand within our faith, as Sanam hit earlier, this need to fight for justice. It's in our DNA. And, I moved from North Carolina where, I was also a senior in high school when 9/11 happened, and our soccer team was nationally ranked. And so we had a lot of media, a lot of buzz, and I would literally get, I had people punching me, in the back, grabbing me, calling me a terrorist. I got, after games when we would, travel, I would get, caught in this circle of parents and students pissed off that we won and yelling the most obscene things at me. I got jumped. And in that moment, I'm like, where are my teammates? Where are the administrators? And one game, I remember, it was a team I used to play for, and I went up to the coach in the middle of the game, and I'm like, hey, this player is in my ear. He's pinching me. He's saying these incredibly racist things. Like, I used to play for you. Like, do something. And he just stared at me blankly, and nothing happened. And so I had this really bad taste in my mouth of the South, and I was like, I got to get the hell out of here. I want to pursue my dreams. Went to Southern California, and I realized that you can't really escape racism. And it's alive and well in Southern California, and it was certainly alive and well in Hollywood. And I'll just tell you this very quick story. I was working, I did it the hard way. I worked in almost every department. I was a production assistant. I was a production manager. I worked in lighting. I was a dolly grip. So anyways, I was a dolly grip on this non-union show, and we had done 4 nights of overtime in a row. And when it came time to get our paychecks, they were only going to pay for 1 night. And I'm like, that's not right. And I went up to the EP, and I had some words with them, and I was kind of fiery. I was also in my early 20s, and I'm like, this is just not right. You promised that we would get OT. You guys all have fancy iPhones, and you drive a Hummer. Go to the fucking ATM and get us our money. I didn't say it like that, but basically, what it was met with, calm down, you dumb Muslim, from an executive producer on a movie. And I'm just like, wow. So anyways, I've been in it for quite some time. 36 Seconds was well received, and we have many other projects that we'd like to do, and we need your support. So let's keep it going.
Thank you, Tarek. I love that. You can't escape racism as someone who's moved from Arkansas to DC. You really cannot. You really cannot. Samia, please.
Nowhere to go. So great to be here. I echo all the thanks that have been given. For me, it has always been very deeply rooted in the pursuit of truth and justice, and I owe that very much to growing up in a community that was building one of the most powerful institutions in the Global South for the Global South. And that was called BCCI, and I'll tell you guys a lot more about it. in a little while. But because of that experience of growing up within an institution that was committed to building power in the Global South, I was born in Oman. I'm originally from Pakistan. We lived in Khartoum. We lived in, we visited all over the Middle East. I was in Kuwait just days before the war. And in fact, my first media memory is we had escaped Kuwait. I turn on the TV, and of course, it's the first time that CNN is live streaming a war and has their, ticker on. And the house that I lived in just 4 days ago has become Saddam's headquarters. So I always was very resonant what was happening on the ground in all of the countries that I lived in. And what I was hearing about them in the news that I was listening to, the international news, was always giving me a lot of cognitive dissonance. And my way of addressing that was actually to work in policy. So I migrated to the US for college, went to the University of Chicago, and then I ended up in policy worlds. I lived in DC, I lived in Nairobi, I was in Islamabad for a while. So all of that was around policy, and we would have these wins, and it would be amazing. You make a little legislative change, and then there's like 100 years of rollback on that one thing that you did. And it really started to occur to me that it was the narrative that we were living with that was immovable. And I had heard Brian Stevenson say something that always continues to resonate with me, which is that the North won the war, but the South won the narrative. And that has been, something that I think about a lot in the context that we operate in all of the time, in which we know what we're seeing, we know what we're experiencing, and as we're experiencing it, we're calling it out. They're calling us conspiracy theorists. And look at what it takes to get them to see our truths. So that has been the journey that has really driven me into storytelling.
Thank you all for sharing those moments, because I think it really indicates why we're all here in this moment. And I wanted all of us to be able to understand what led us to being here. So Samia and Tarek, I wanted to turn to your sort of films and sort of the storytelling that you do with, for me, the objective is around how do we shape policy, right? As someone who's been in DC for 20 years and like trying to change, some of these harmful policies that we've seen over the last 20 years. Your film, for example, Tarek, about hate crimes, or Samia around the accidental activists. When you're making these films and you're telling these stories and the way you've told the stories, do you have sort of, is it the objective when you're thinking about telling these stories is that I'm trying to change the hate crime legislation, or I'm trying to change some sort of policy or policy objective when you're telling this story, or is it just I'm trying to tell this story?
I guess I could start. That certainly wasn't part of my process. My process is documentary films at this point they're so good. They're the premium docs, the bar is up here, and we have a responsibility to make really compelling films that move you. That is the job. That is the job number one. As filmmakers, we are getting a lot dumped on our lap. We're raising money, we're thinking about impact strategy, we're thinking about marketing, distribution. We're just trying to make a film. Like, that is hard enough. That is impossible, actually. It's a miracle that any of us get our films made. But if we do our jobs well, that should be a byproduct. And it should be a byproduct with who you're partnering with, the organizations that you're getting involved with, and be strategic about who you're actually featuring in the film. Right? If you have an expert, maybe feature an expert that's actually working on changing policy, so that, at the end of it, and you're doing these panel discussions and you're sharing your film, that it's like this organic connection. So for us, I don't want to take anything away from the Barakat and Abu Salha family, because they were doing it day one. And I think that was something that was super special about our film. I had personally never seen anything like it. They went from victims, and in less than 24 hours, they were activists. I mean, when does that happen? Usually there's like a little bit of a buffer. Maybe you have like a week to grieve and you just kind of lock yourself in the house. Dr. Suzanne Barakat was still in her scrubs the next morning, doing a press conference, calling out the law enforcement, calling out the administration. They got the attention of President Barack Obama. Like, they were warriors, but they were also supported by the community. So like in terms of policy, in terms of like advocacy, they were already doing it. And the Muslim community, we all felt like we just need to help them in any way possible. Like for me, my tool was filmmaking, but there were people, senior advisors at the Obama administration, there were civil rights activists, like everyone was just like, yo, what do you need? How do we get this done? So, you know, job number one, make a good film, move people.
And you did that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. You know, as a filmmaker, I'm like, you know, professionally curious, nosy, professional auntie. Like, how you doing? So what's going on? So tell me more. So what can we do? So let's come over. Let's have tea. What's going on? You know, it's like that is the job, is to go after it and to find the story and to and create something that's so compelling that people want to watch it. Because if no one watches it, then there's no policy change happening. You know, nothing is going to shift. And I think as the filmmaking process itself is so, you know, it takes years. And throughout that process, you do get informed about like what kind of policy shifts might happen or what policies were not enforced that led to the movie that you're making, perhaps, right? So it's often actually the lack of policy that you end up addressing in your film. At least I think that's what's happened to me on many occasions.
No, that's absolutely true. Joy, I wanted to ask you, as someone who, my parents watch you religiously in our house, but as we're sort of looking at the next 4 years, we're one week in, Joy. The last week in DC has been quite the week. We've seen executive orders on immigration, on foreign policy, on issues that are going to impact all of our Black and brown communities in a profound way, which I'm 1 week into being the chair of the MPAC board. When Salam was like, stand up, you're the chair of the board, is because I took on this role because of the next 4 years and what we are going to be facing as a community. But you are the face of MSNBC and the resistance in some ways of fighting back. I want to ask you, how do we, through film and through what you're doing in the media, how do you see your role in sort of shaping and changing those policies in the ways that you have been that voice over the last several years, but over the next 4 years?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank your parents. The parents are my base. Moms and dads are my base. So thank you to my base. They're the only ones who have cable. Everyone else is like, I love you on IG. I'm like,
yeah, they pay for the cable.
Yeah, they pay for the cable. And the part I skipped in my bio was when I quit. You know, when I quit local news, I went and worked on a campaign. I worked on a campaign to try to oust George W. Bush. And then from that, I ended up working on the Obama campaign at the very end, tail end of the Obama campaign. And I say that to say that the thought in my head at the time is that the policy differences between Republicans and Democrats on the issues I care about are stark. And in some ways, they are. The rhetoric is very different. The story that's told is very different. But in some ways, particularly when we're talking about the part of the world that I think we're all sort of focused on right now, the policy changes are they're not that stark. And I think that is, and part of that is the stories that I think the American people are told and believe. And so this is why I think storytelling is so important. This morning, going through, just checking and read a few AP stories. So the Associated Press, and this is about story, is, like myself, going to continue to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico, because it is the Gulf of Mexico. And the AP style book is going to continue to call it the Gulf of Mexico, because while the U.S. can make policy about what U.S. maps say, they can't make policy for Mexico, Guatemala, Peru. Like, other countries can call it what they want to call it. But when the same organization, the Associated Press, recounted an interview that the new president, Donald Trump, just gave about his policy in Israel and in Gaza and the Palestinian territories, the way he said, his quote, and I can't quote him directly, but this is close to it: we need to clear out Gaza. Mm-hmm. Other countries need to take more people. Egypt and Jordan can take at least 1 million people, and then we just need to clear it all out, clear Gaza out, and declare it's over. Now that textbook, if you go to the ICC and the IRC, that is actually ethnic cleansing. Mm-hmm. But the AP, which is holding the line on the Gulf of Mexico, did not describe ethnic cleansing as ethnic cleansing. They did this story in a very benign way that didn't raise a huge red flag alarm, that is a call for ethnic cleansing, particularly since Donald Trump has declared Gaza really great real estate with ocean views. And he is a real estate developer, as is his son-in-law, who has a $2 billion from the Saudi royal family. Like, there's all these stories that we as curious auntie, because I'm a nosy auntie too. And when I got obsessed with the Iran hostage crisis, my mom said, you need to go look up why they would have done that. You need to go to the library. We didn't have internet at the time. And you need to figure out the problem. And it's like, oh, it's the Dulleses. Oh, it's the CIA overthrew. You need a backstory, right? You need context. And I think what's wrong with our media right now is that we're giving people very surface information without context. And that we're avoiding, particularly when it comes to the Middle East, saying a thing that is a clear thing. When the ICC and the IRC adjudicate whether there's a genocide, we still, in the media side, don't say what they said. When South Africa, goes in and argues a case in which they're supported by Ireland and other countries, and they're very assertively saying official words out of their mouths, which we could report, we're sort of only reporting the pieces that already fit a narrative that the American people prefer. And so I think we're not challenging our audiences enough to see the context and to see the reality and to actually understand the nuances of these stories, because people have already taken a side in their minds. But we don't even understand that. I mean, the previous panel was talking about the fact that the Middle East conflict, as we call it, is not a Jewish versus Muslim conflict, because there are Christians and Muslims and Jews on the Palestinian side alone. If you go to the old little town of Bethlehem, well, that's a Palestinian city. The people there are Palestinian and Christian. They're Palestinians. Okay, so we don't even understand that. So we don't know. We don't understand maps. We don't know where these countries are. People are like, let's go to war in Iran. I'm like, do you know how big Iran is? It's bigger than Iraq. You need to pull out a globe and you need to look at it. And the earth is round. You need to look. And so I sometimes, the things that I do on my little team, and it annoys my team, I'm like, context. I want all the context. I don't want to just say this thing happened. I want the context, and I need a map, like for Americans, because we don't know geography. That's it.
We're not so good at geography. No. But there's something that you just said, which I want to touch on, which is about we have been trying to control the narrative in some ways, right? Like, this is what MPAC is doing. This is what we're doing on the Hill. This is what we're doing with the media. This is what we're doing with Hollywood. How do we, it feels like we're spinning in some ways, right? Like post 9/11 and then October 7th and then all of these things. And it's like we make some steps forward and then we're pushed back and then we make some steps forward. I would love your thoughts, whether it's hate crime legislation, whether it's, the work that you're doing on the banking sector, whether it's, how you're telling stories and sharing the news in an authentic way. How do you, as Black and Brown communities, writ large, how do we sort of take back that narrative? And how does social media and social justice, right? Because Black Lives Matter and the role of social media and the Palestinian narratives and post 9/11 hate crimes narratives, like that's been a huge part of how we take back that narrative and the control. But I would love your feedback and your sort of thoughts as storytellers and how we do that. Samia, let me turn to you.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think is really important is who are we telling these stories for? Why are we always trying to change the dominant narrative, like that mindset alone? Yes, it's important, but how about we just remind one another of our stories? How about we have our own ecosystem, we have our own stories, and we're telling that story to us and to each other? Because how are we gonna get, I don't wanna give that man any more of my energy. That battle to fight, okay, it's there, of course, it's important, but I think our own stories have been lost. When I say BCCI, the most powerful global South institution that was building power in the Muslim world, how many people knew that in here, right? So I think that is a step that is so critical, especially in these times, is that we turn to each other and we remind one another of what our own narratives and our own stories are. Because if we're constantly just fighting what's coming out of that side, then when we really need to get together and come up with something, we're not going to remember who each other are. So I think let's turn the gaze so that we're not always just looking to them to accept our stories. Let's just go out and tell our stories and build our audience, and it's happening. It's happening.
Two things came to mind. I believe you almost have to keep it simple. You want people to walk a mile in your shoes. And, for instance, in my last doc, just imagine if you were the parents of these children who literally did everything right. I mean, I looked for dirt. There was none. They didn't even cuss. They were just pillars of their, society, of their community, and you just want to empathize. You want to feel what it's like to be this mother, this sister who's grieving, it's just not fair. And I think the average American can relate to that. Right? This is a horrible thing. What did they have to go through? What is their pain? And what is the connective tissue to my own kids? Oh, my kids play basketball. My kids dance around the house and listen to hip hop. Start simple, get them, and then to your point, context. Hate crimes is a tricky thing. They're hard to prosecute. They're outdated. Some people don't want to go to law enforcement and admit that they were a victim of a hate crime. Some folks may not have their citizenship and might be worried about being deported. So, offering a little bit of context after you've made that emotional connection to your characters, I believe that's how we start to have some change.
And I think also we have to treat the world as one world and treat these stories as interconnected, right? So when we got in the car this morning, our driver's name was Tanka, and he greeted us in his language. He's Navajo. And when I came here, Sue, when she got on the stage, greeted us with Assalamu alaikum, right? And in a greeting and these are the same greeting. Both of the greetings were peace be unto you. Connection. We're seeing doors kicked in to restaurants in New Jersey and around the country, in Chicago, people showing up at schools looking for, quote unquote, illegal immigrants. Our driver, Tanka, who is, again, Navajo, so he should be evicting a lot of other people. Told us a story. And he said, this is the benefits of riding with me. We were like, we'll hang with you all day, because we were like, it's going to take us long to get here because road closures. He was like, well, I'll just tell you stories. We're like, tell us one. He told us that members of the Navajo Nation have been stopped by ICE and asked to show an identity card that proved that they are, quote, blood Indians. Okay? So feel me now. The settlers are telling the indigenous to do what is happening to the Palestinians, right, in the West Bank, who are being told to show their papers to go from here to there. You can't go from your home, your family's house in Jenin, right, to Gaza. You can't even physically get there, but you have to have permission. Okay, so again, these are two different regions, two different stories, but they're the same story. It is people being told you don't belong here, even though your legacy is here. And if anyone in this room, when we got here, Naira, who is of Pakistani descent, I think she's Pakistani descent, she said that she walks with her passport. Why? Because if you look at Naira, and you are your average ICE agent who doesn't really know the difference, she might look Hispanic to you. She might look Latina. Yeah. A mixed race, black and white person might look. I have cousins that probably look Latina, right? If I walked up to you and you didn't tell me where you were from, I don't know. If I wasn't trained to know, I might ask you for your papers. I might ask you for yours. I might ask you for yours. I might ask you for yours. How would any of you prove if I said, prove to me that you're an American? Could you prove it right now? Prove it now that you're not Latina and that you're not undocumented. I couldn't prove it. I couldn't prove it. If you just came up to me right now and everyone in this room was demanded to show that they belong here, nor could my driver this morning, who just, you look at him, you can see that he's indigenous, you can see that he's Native American, he would still get asked. So we're in a world right now where it's not just the one orange president, right? We're in an age of iniquity. We're in an age of injustice. And I love what Salam said when he started, that the whole point of religion is to bring justice. You can't just bring justice to my driver and his community without bringing justice to the people in the West Bank and Gaza, without bringing justice to Black Lives Matter victims who were just on a drive and get pulled over by police and they get killed, without bringing justice to a white woman in Texas who could go to jail for having a miscarriage. Do you see what I mean? It's all connected. And unless we care about the Iranian woman who is arrested for not covering, but also care about the woman who covers and chooses to and gets harassed at the airport, we have to care about both. And so I struggle really with the limited nature of what I do, because I feel like in an hour, a night, 5 nights a week, I cannot cover all the injustice. And the injustice keeps me up at night. And the injustice hurts my soul. And so I'm thankful that in addition to the little bit of TV I do in my IG, which apparently is where everybody under 60 gets my news.
Not my mama and daddy.
And except mom, I tell you, the parents are my base. I told you, I love them. I'm thankful for the storytellers, because you all actually have the space to tell a full story that I can't. And so I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to pick up on something you just said, which is the alliances that are so necessary to create between our communities, between the sort of underrepresented Black and brown communities, communities of women. So when I'm on the Hill and I'm talking about a bill to members of Congress that will potentially affect MPAC or or reduce funding for nonprofits, or impact legislation in some ways that will impact all of us in this room, members of Congress will tell me, don't come to us just as a Muslim organization. Come back to us with the NAACP, come back to us with J Street, come back to us with other communities. And on one hand, I wish we were at the point where we could just walk in and kick the door down and be like, we're here and we want this to change. And I think inshallah we will be there one day. But at this point, those alliances are so important and they carry so much strength for us. And when we walk in with those groups, with the ACLU, with the NAACP, with J Street, with all of our allies, we bring so much heft and strength with our communities. And so I do think there is a natural alliance in that sort of injustice and how we are approaching some of these issues. And so when it comes to policy and what MPAC is trying to do and how we're trying to change things in Washington, this is such a huge part of what we're trying to do. And so I do want to turn to Tariq and Samia real quick, because your films and a lot of these films, and this was touched on in the last panel that Salam talked about, is what are the obstacles that you face when you're trying to get these stories told? For example, like why is your film not on Netflix? Like why?
Yeah, Tariq, why is it on Netflix?
Like let me reframe that. How do we get it on Netflix?
Well, I mean, we had been in talks with them even during production, and we had a connection to one of the executives, and at first we wanted to do it as like a 3-part series, so we showed them like a rough cut of episode 1, and it was like, oh, this is cool, but our team really feels like this should be a feature, and I'm like, great, okay, we'll make it a feature. At least they're still interested, so we went and we made our feature. We shared it with them, and they loved it. And one of the executives called me. We had a 12-minute conversation where she was raving very specifically about how we told the story. And the last thing she said is, but we're not going to pick it up. And she didn't give me a reason, and that's typically what they do. They won't tell you the real reason. And so you're like, okay, well, we're going to do this film festival run. We're going to go to the other buyers. And we met with all of them. We met with HBO. We met with Hulu. And we just did not understand it, because we did so many revisions. Like, I pushed our team. I mean, some of them had mental breakdowns because, I mean, it just wanted to meet that high bar. I did not want them to think that it wasn't a premium doc or it wasn't, you know, we tried to frame it in a way where it was a true crime story that was going to appeal to a wider audience, but it's going to have that authentic Muslim American story that we demanded and we fought to keep in the film. And you know what? There's just only so much you could control, right? I mean, if they said no and they're not going to pick it up, you have to scramble, right? So you do community screenings. You know, do an international broadcast deal with TRT. You try to do a domestic thing with PBS, and think outside the box. Like we partnered with Zateo for our DC screening, and it was amazing. It was a sold-out screening, and Mehdi Hassan was the moderator, and it was just a really meaningful conversation with, you know, the executive director, Maya Berry of the Arab American Institute, and Dr. Suzanne was on the panel, and thousands of people watched it. And there were hundreds and hundreds of comments, and so many people were like, they didn't even know the film existed. And they're like, thank you, Mehdi, for sharing this film. So I think to Alana and the folks at Watermelon Pictures, we have to think outside the box. We have to have a very robust strategy for our films. But also, I want to say, let's not forget about HBO and Netflix and all these people, because guess what? People change. You know, the executives, you know, they may not be there in a couple months. You know, right now, I think everyone's playing it safe. They're looking at their algorithms, and they're spending $5 billion on WWE wrestling. You know, but that may change in a year. So if we all have these connections to these executives and these studios, let's keep that going. Let's be in their ear. Let's force them to watch our pictures. And in the meantime, let's figure out a way to get it to the audiences. But it is not easy. I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I mean, it's not easy. Wow, that's pretty much it. That really is pretty much it. But I think that, you know, I've been organizing with Muslim filmmakers for a while around, like, again, fighting this uphill battle of why don't they understand how to watch our movies? Why don't they understand how to read our proposals? Why are they always looking for post-9/11 logics? You know, that, yes, that has been existing, but I think building our own community and our own supports, and also building alliances with other people whose struggles we share. You know, we are not the only filmmakers in the room who are being persecuted out here by Netflix, okay? We're not that special. So this is a broader kind of industry question, and we're all struggling through it, and so working together across our little silos of, you know, as Muslim filmmakers is the only real way to move forward. And also, I want to shout out globally. You know, we might be looking in the United States and being like, Netflix doesn't want our movies, but why aren't we going to the Busan Film Festival? You know, why aren't we going to Red Sea? Why aren't we all over? There's a really big world out there. And as soon as we get in here, we tend to get really small and just thinking about our own, you know, what we can see just out here. But there actually is a lot of space around the world and a lot of exciting things happening. So I'm going to try to keep it a little positive. It's not easy, but, you know, there's hope. I feel that, you know, there's a whole world out there.
That's right. That's right. And on that note, can you just share a little bit about your recent project that you mentioned?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm in production right now about, and it's a story about the world's biggest institution, biggest bank to come out of the global south. And it was started in the 70s by a group of Pakistanis, and the first organization that was funded by the wealth in the Middle East. And it became the third largest bank in the world. It had locations all over the world, and its mission was to empower the global south. And then in 1991, the United States government decided that it was no longer a viable institution and shut it down. And it went down in history as the world's largest criminal enterprise. I was 9 years old when this was happening. And the reason that I know about it is because I went out for lunch one day and opened the newspaper. Well, not like I went out to lunch by myself as a 9-year-old. Sat on the counter, grabbed a newspaper, opened it. And my father's photograph was in there as one of the world's sleaziest bankers because he was one of the heads of this institution. We fled to Pakistan, you know, very shortly after. And of course, in 2008, we saw what the banks did. So who gets bailed out? Who gets to have power? How does power work, and how do they take it away? Coming soon.
Oh my God, that was, we were all, I was just like, I was hanging on to every word.
I'm booking both of them, by the way. You both need to come on my show. I'm like,
Yes, done.
I already booked Watermelon Pictures. There's a guy Justin here. I'm literally filling my whole calendar.
I love it. I love it. That was amazing.
The Banker's Daughter.
Oh, I love it.
But where are you in production? Like, where is this?
I've just returned from 6 weeks in Pakistan, where one of my main characters is Manuel Noriega's banker, and the other one is my father and my family, who was accused of funneling money to Saddam Hussein. So my next step is that I have a lot more investigating to do. And I think that we have maybe, another little while left in production, and then there'll be the post-production, and it's not easy. Again.
Not easy, but we're going to screen this in Washington.
Yeah.
Oh, we're hosting. I'm already planning. So you're amazing, Samia. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for telling that story. I have one more question for you, and then I want to open it up to the audience. Joy, I want to ask you, because there's direct parallels behind in how our communities organize in terms of, and I touched on this a little bit, like the social activism, right? And how the Black community organized after Black Lives Matter. And it really sort of changed the narrative, right? I mean, the whole world saw the injustice of how many of us, I mean, living in the South, I've always seen how the disparity between racially, right? Do you have sort of thoughts on how our community, Muslim American community, sort of how we can sort of drive that narrative and change the narrative, given how you've sort of driven the conversation, given your platform for Black Americans post George Floyd?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I think pay attention to the backlash. A lot of the anti-DEI conversation really is about the tremendous backlash to the George Floyd, in many ways, performative corporate response. Because it's not as if George Floyd was the first Black man killed by police. It's just that everyone was at home, stuck home because of COVID, watching it. And then when people were outside, they were going outside to protest it. And for a lot of white Americans, they were shocked to see their own children joining those protests. And I will note the ways in which the pushback was organized. They first called the protests violent. 96% of them were nonviolent. They then claimed that the protests were burning cities down. It then turned out, as we were doing more reporting, that it was anarchists who were against Black Lives Matter who were coming in, smashing windows, and creating violence in order to blame the violence on the protesters, something that also happened during the 1960s when provocateurs would attempt to turn the country against the Kingian nonviolent movement by saying, no, it's really violent. So the way that pushback has been so thorough that now essentially Black people are being driven out of universities, university positions, driven out of corporate America. Target is now facing its own boycott because it's dropped DEI. Everyone is joining the Stephen Miller / Donald Trump bandwagon of dropping any changes that they attempted to make post. So the same backlash has happened to the Me Too movement, which was also created by a Black woman. But the backlash has been so thorough that, we're now back to women need to go home, have babies, and you're a childless cat lady, and you get no respect. Like, it's so aggressive. So I think one thing that the Muslim community has to know is that for every advancement that you make in this way, every story you get to tell, the backlash is going to be furious. The backlash is going to be fierce. And to face that backlash, you need to understand and study these other movements and also join in solidarity, because we've been there, done, like as Black folks, like we've been doing this since 1619. And so we kind of know how it goes. And I think people understood that backlash was coming, but you have to fight it anyway and get your narratives out anyway. And one of the ways in which Black Lives Matter sort of changed the game in terms of traditional organizing is that traditional traditional organizing took place in churches, and it was physical organizing. That was very digital organizing, which is easier to pull off, but harder to sustain, because there has to be more organizing behind just hashtagging. There has to actually also be a ground element to it. You have to actually have physical organizing that backs up what you're doing online. And the ways in which Black Lives Matter has truly been destroyed as a movement by the backlash, I think, is instructive. But the part that has remained and survived are the physical organizations that were not just hashtag organizations. I mean, we're talking about Latasha Brown and Black Voters Matter. Like, that is still there. They're still fighting on the ground. So make sure that as you're organizing and telling your stories, that you have physical infrastructure to your movement. And then also the ways that the original civil rights movement, their old Black Lives Matter, the Kingian Black Lives Matter, they used TV. And while TV mostly is, mamas and grandmas that are watching, it still has power. Yeah. And so don't be afraid to get yourself booked, not just on my show or on Eamon's show or on Ali Velshi's show, but try to push your way into the media. And one of the things that Ta-Nehisi Coates has said that is so true is that actual, particularly Palestinian voices are so few and far between. People are not being allowed to tell their own stories. I'm telling people stories that are not my story. I have a deep empathy for the story. The story is close to my heart, but it's not my story. So we're constantly looking for you. We're looking for people who can tell the story in their own voice. So find a way to raise your hand and make yourself available. When you get that booking call, take it. Whether it's on Fox or CNN, it doesn't matter. We need more Muslim voices. Ali and Eamon are awesome, but they cannot do it by themselves. So please put yourselves out there. There's so many of you who've spoken today who would be so great as public voices. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. It's terrifying to put yourself out there because the backlash is insane. I'm also booking you, by the way. Sorry, and you're local. I'm in DC, so I'm there like, you come on set. But it's terrifying, but at the same time, the more public you are, one of the things I've learned in my little journey is that the more public I am, it is in a sense a shield. If you're very small and you make yourself small, right, you're more vulnerable because people can make you disappear and no one much will notice other than your loved ones. If you're big and loud and public, it's kind of harder to hurt you. So come out big and loud and vocal and visible. You actually make yourself safer.
And you're trying to make me cry. You're trying to make me cry.
I'm actually just trying to get invited to your house so your parents will come. I feel like I would get a really great time.
You'd have a lot of fun.
You know what? Can I just say something based on what you were saying? So many of us watched Shireen's film last night, and we were so moved, and we saw how beautiful it was. And she's going to do some tough interviews in the next few weeks. And it's so important that we have Watermelon and MPAC and anyone else, and hopefully our allies that, can act as something that she can rest inside of, that she can rest inside the support of the community that is behind her. And that's why I say tell the story you want to tell for your community, because who's going to be there to hold you when you're under attack for your story not being even?
That's so true. Thank you for that. But I did want to open it up for questions since we have a little bit of time. So please raise your hand and please share your name and direct your question.
Hi. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Introduce yourself.
My family, Nicole Sanzio. Joy, I worked with you at NBC News. So anytime I see something that might be awareness worthy, please don't get offended when I say, this is my colleague or my ex-colleague. When I tag you like that. I handled rights and clearances for NBC News for over 13 years. And I worked on everything Joy Reid, to the Today Show, Meet the Press, anything NBC News. I'm nervous because I'm not verbally gifted, but I am
Doing great.
Great.
But I am gifted in business and copyright and protecting intellectual property. So as anybody in the creative industry is trying to field their way in post-production, I'm here for you. And I wanted to ask you, though, a lot, like with everything that's happening with the media, do you reach out to any non-Western media outlets to get your sourcing?
Yes, I'm a regular reader of international news, and I think it's so important for Americans to break out. I mean, it's so easy. You can just get on The Guardian, you can just get on BBC, you can read Agence France Presse, you can read Reuters International. Like, there is so much international news, and it's so much easier to get at it that I think you really limit yourself. Even if you're just reading the New York Times, like, you're limiting yourself. So yes, I very much, and we have a somewhat of a partnership with Sky News at work, as you know. So we try to avail ourselves. Now, the difficulty is also time difference. It's very difficult. In stories regarding the Palestinian, the horrors that are happening in Gaza, that's been really hard because there's a huge amount of limitations that are placed on what we can get at. I read Al Jazeera English on a regular basis. I get a lot of great info from there. But, you know, the time difference of booking people that are in region is very tough. But yes, to the greatest extent possible, because it just gives you balance in terms of what you know.
Thank you. All right. Assalamu alaikum. Hello. My name is Khaled Ghunim, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and just so inspired by all of you and all of your power and courage. It's just unreal to be in the space with you. So thank you for all that you do. Something that I've been pondering a lot is in the space of decolonization and thinking about decolonization for all of us and how do we unlearn everything that we've been conditioned, both for like the media space, but then in society, but then also within ourselves. And I'm wondering for you all, like this incredible work that you're leading externally, do you feel like there's things on the inside that you've had to do to decolonize within yourselves, if you're open to sharing that kind of unlearning that you have had to do internally? Thanks.
Okay, they're all looking at me.
Yeah, I know. Everyone's looking at you, Samia.
So, yeah, I think it's absolutely essential. And the process of making art is alchemizing, is oftentimes alchemizing your trauma, alchemizing whatever it is that you've inherited. And I think for me, one of the most important pieces of decolonization has been happening as I'm making this movie. These men who went on to create this powerful institution, their attitude was essentially, we kicked out the British, yay. And now we're going to conquer the world. Yay. And I think one of the things that I have had to understand, even though I knew it intellectually, is that all of these constructs that have been placed on me, as, you know, a woman of color, Muslim, they're all labels that were not created by me, for me. And so what are pieces of those that I take and I internalize and I say, yes, these pieces are true, and what are pieces of that narrative, not just the identifiers, but the narrative that goes along with it that I have to decolonize within myself, because even those terms are colonial terms, you know? So that has been the process for me, and it's been happening as I'm making this movie in a very concrete way.
I think it's just, you know, educating ourselves, because, you know, if the only story of the Palestinian struggle that you hear is from your parents and your aunties, I mean, that's a pretty limited view. It's important, and you should understand that, but you got to go deeper, and you got to, you know, educate yourself, and, you know, don't allow Western media and Western academic, you know, space to tell you that, you know, the entire Middle East, just write it off because it's a mess. You have to understand, well, what really happened, what transpired, who took over, and why is it run like a mafia, and how could we get people to understand that the truth, and that's the stories that we want to tell, actually, you know, because we all have a lot of family there, and we care about these places, and we know that there's good humans there that aren't, you know, just victims of oppression. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're journalists, they're human beings that have feelings and ambitions. And, you know, I shot on the Turkish-Syrian border once, and when I'm meeting these quote-unquote refugees, you know, it's important to tell them and to look in their eyes and just acknowledge that we are lucky. I'm lucky that I was born in the United States. Like, I could easily be in their shoes, right? And yeah, it's just those experiences of being there and sharing these stories with even somebody you're sitting next to on a plane. A I'll tell you this one quick story. I was flying from LA to New York, and oftentimes when you go from LA to New York, you're gonna have industry people there, right? And I could hear the conversation right in front of me, and it was during COVID, so everyone's a little on edge anyways. But it was a DP and a director, and I knew the language, right? Because I speak the language. And they started talking about the Middle East, and there was a comment of, well, yeah, women have no rights in the Middle East. And the other guy claimed that he, studied the Quran and he knows the Quran. And I'm like, dude, I speak fluent Arabic and I still don't really understand the Quran. Like, let's be real. And I just said, I just had to say something. I just leaned in and I said, excuse me. I just want you to know that that's factually incorrect. It's factually incorrect. I have family. I have an aunt in Lebanon who owns her own company that doesn't wear hijab. Like, I just started, boom, and I shoved my phone in his face. I was like, "Would you like to text her? Would you like to call? Like, this is real. What you can go about your day speaking this BS, but I just want you to know that you are factually incorrect." Mike Charles.
Right, I mean, how do people explain Benazir Bhutto? Like, how do they explain what we can't even have Hillary or Kamala? You know what? I'll very quickly say that my answer to this is, back in the Iraq War days, there used to be that saying that you would hear a lot repeated on TV. Why do they hate us?
Yeah.
Like before they were like, we're gonna have freedom fries and stuff. And the thing that I noticed, that no one ever answered it. In the media, right? They would say, why do they hate us? And they would just leave that as an open question to allow people to fill it with whatever they'd learned at church. And, because Christians are like, well, we got to take this side because of we're Christians. And so we just take these people's side. And the simplistic nature of America's understanding of the entire Muslim world is actually the fault in many ways of our education system, which is not very global based, but it's also the fault of our media. I'm being honest, we're failing you in that we should have, the people, and back then I was just a digital editor. I had no power to do it. We didn't have the internet the way we do now. They should have answered that question. It's the same thing that I had to seek the answer to why would a bunch of students in Iran take American hostages. There's a whole story there, and one of them has an airport named after them. That Dulles is a thing that exists. Well, who was Dulles? Well, what did he do? What did he and his brother do? Things don't just happen because people are just insane. There's reasons. There is a context to all of these stories. It is much more complicated. It's a harder thing to do, to decolonize your own brain as a news person, because what the audience wants is 6 minutes of what I already believe, right? We just have to decolonize our thinking as journalists to say, no, history didn't start on the day of this bad thing. It didn't start on 9/11. What happened? Not that you're never justifying bad things, but you're saying, why did this happen? Because I think it actually is comforting in some ways to just at least have some understanding of why.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with everything that's said. And I think it's still really hard, right? I mean, as a Muslim woman, as a South Asian Muslim woman who's, in Washington, D.C., in these spaces with powerful white men, it's very, very difficult to assert your voice and to find your voice and to sort of make sure that our perspectives are heard. And sometimes I still find it difficult. And I'm at a firm and I'm a mom and my parents live with me. I have all of these different things and I'm still just like, wait, I'm a Muslim woman and I am a lawyer and I'm all of these other things, and all of those things shatter a lot of the stereotypes that you have in your mind. And at first, it's like you want to sort of shy away from those things just because that's what we were taught as children of immigrants, as to sort of put your head down, don't try to say too much. Don't try to act out, as my mom says. But I think it's sort of breaking out in our own ways and sort of finding our own voices. And so I think it's really important. I know we have one more question here.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Arshad. Tariq, it was very simple with Netflix and Amazon. All you needed to do was remove the word Muslim from your movie, and you would have made it. Joanne, I just want to ask you a question that's been really, really bothering me, which is that I want you to address the tone policing of the centrists. I want you to address how they have harmed our struggle. And I specifically want to know why you do not give third parties a chance in this country, and how the Democratic Party has butt Hamased all of us. And how now that we know so much of the truth of October 7th, why that is never addressed in the media, and why those people aren't held accountable who actually lied, and like the New York Times story and all this stuff. So this kind of gaslighting has never been addressed. And I want to know how we can correct it, and I want to know how, it can be addressed, yeah.
I mean, it was never really addressed after 9/11 either, right? And the New York Times essentially, goaded us into war, no different than sort of the yellow journalism of, before the Spanish, the wars, to take over Cuba, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in the early 20th century. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the binary system in our politics is kind of built into our politics in some ways. And so third parties aren't taken seriously because they actually cannot win a presidential election. And I think that's one of the criteria in which people don't address third parties, because can you or can you not get 270 electoral votes? You cannot. They cannot. So they don't get any traction. So I think that's the simple answer there. Bernie Sanders, in order to run for president, had to run as either a D or an R, so he picked D. And then the fight internally to sort of expel him like, just sort of expel him like a virus that had come into the body is what produced all of that rancor that actually it helped to take Hillary Clinton down. And so because we don't talk about the context of how our politics works, I think that's the answer to that piece. And as far as the tone policing on the coverage, you're talking about the coverage of the politics in Israel-Palestine, yeah. I think number one, and I started by saying this, I think people think the politics of Republicans and Democrats are very starkly different, and they're not on this issue. The politics of progressives and Democrats are very different. So AOC and, Cori Bush and progressives who are in the Democratic Party out of the same convenience, which is why that Bernie Sanders basically allies with the Democrats, even though he's not one, right? In order to have power, you have to be in the Democratic Party, but they're also in the Justice Democrats, and they're in all these other coalitions. New York allows that. But the progressives and Democrats are on very different sides here. When it comes to this policy. But the subtleties, the tiny differences, both want to send bombs, okay? They both want to send all the bombs, right? They both do, right? But one side speaks with sometimes slightly more compassion. Biden surprised me, the lack of compassion, because he's generally a compassionate man. On this issue, he just for some reason, it just didn't work. He didn't feel it, I guess. But the other side had just said, clearly, we're going to clear out. The other one is clear. And there were a lot of Muslim voters who, again, because we didn't do a good job of explaining really what the difference is between these two sides. Mehdi Hassan really tried. Yeah. He went out and got, just taken apart on social media for trying to say, yeah, this side is not optimal, but this side is really bad. And now he's letting his freak flag fly on what he wants to do to Gaza. And it's like, surprise, you voted for it's even worse. But I've talked a lot. I was in conversation with the uncommitted folks all through the convention, and I was in conversation with them all through and after. And, these are people whose families are dead. I couldn't make a moral argument to them as to why they should be committed. So I'm a journalist, and it's not my job to tell them what to do, but I couldn't, what moral argument can I make if 120 of your family is dead? I have no moral argument to tell you must vote on this side. All I can do is say, here's what this side is offering, and here's what this side will do. Yeah. And then you have to choose. And lesser of two evils, unfortunately, is the way politics has always worked for people who are in the minority. Always. Black folk, we've chosen lesser of two evils. We got one Obama. Don't act like that was like we got that one. We got one. The rest of it was like Woodrow Wilson or the devil. Or you know what I mean? It was like, none of them were good. They were all terrible. Yeah. So it's like, my first vote, I had to age myself. I had to vote for Michael Dukakis. I wanted Jesse Jackson. I'm like, I wanted Jesse Jackson. I had to vote for Michael Dukakis. So it's like, this is the reality of politics.
One more. Okay, we have, yeah. Okay.
Thank you guys so much for this conversation. And I just wanted to make a quick note. The reason I felt compelled to do it, because I may be one of the few people in the room that can make this note. Something I've been reflecting on a lot, and it was featured in a question, Sophia, that you gave to Joy about what the Muslim American community can learn from the Black American community, who have been navigating whiteness and white supremacy for our existence, as we were brought into the world as a people via white supremacy and white violence. But sometimes there's something really important that the Muslim community skips over. and there's a whole bunch of black Muslims. So, you know, so it's not like a thing you have to think. And I don't. This isn't a critique. This is I want to. It's like you have a cheat code in your back pocket, meaning Black Americans, the Muhammad Ali's of the world, the Malcolm X's of the world, are experts at navigating media, navigating narrative, navigating whiteness, and all of those things. And but when we talk more and more about the Muslim American community, just in people's imagination, it's kind of like the children of immigrants, that part of the imagination. And there's these millions and millions of black Muslims who, from a long tradition of engaging these types of questions, narrative, violence, dehumanization. So I just want to, this is an encouragement to everyone to remember that you have this cheat code. You have Black American Muslims. This is like the peak of people dealing with this kind of violence and dehumanization, maybe as much as anyone else in the world. And so I just want to encourage to use that, and to that we're here for that, and that we have narratives, and we have not just our own narratives, but we're experts in crafting narratives around these things. And so I just want to encourage that in the imagination of the American Muslim community, that you have these millions and millions of expert Black Americans to use.
Can I just say something
you,
to
brother.
that?
Thank
Because
you.
and thank you for saying that, because 1/3 of the enslaved who were brought to the United States were Muslims. 1/3 of those black people were Muslims. And it's one of the reasons that, for a lot of white Americans, the name Barack Hussein Obama freaked them out. But we got so many Baracks and Husseins in our family that we have, because a lot of us are, if we're not Muslim, my hairstylist, Coco, she's Muslim, her family's all Muslim. Like, we just know so many Muslims. So there's not a fear. And when Malcolm X did the Hajj, all the Muslims he knew were black. So when he went to the Hajj, he for the first time saw blue-eyed Muslims. He for the first time saw white Muslims. He didn't even, for him, all the Muslims were black. So the reality is, right, understand that we don't have to get in community. We're already a community. Amen.
So
A multiracial
Thank you.
community. It's what he
Thank
said
you
was
for-
so beautiful.
I know. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad you made that comment, because growing up, I went to Little Rock Central High. I'm from Arkansas. And so I went to the first school that was desegregated in the South that allowed black folks. And so and when my dad came to this country, he's much darker and was mistaken he came in 1967 and was mistaken for as black, and went to the black bathroom and instead of the white bathroom. And so our whole existence in the South was allyship with black folk and black Muslims, and because that's where we felt acceptance as Muslims and as immigrants, as others. And so I just want to recognize that that's such an important point you made, and thank you for making that. It's in it. Thank you. Yes, this is the last question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today, sharing your important words, all of your important work. I'm going to probably not have as good a question as all of these others, but I'm going to pick up on building viewership. And it sounded like kind of like marketing or PR in a way that you were talking about, Joy. Could you comment on how filmmakers, how this maybe is for Watermelon Pictures as well, how we can use marketing, right, to build that viewership, to get our narrative out, and in building that viewership to get the interest of these much larger or more powerful distribution channels that can then amplify those messages? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about. It has to be a very robust strategy. Like, if you come to Sammy or I and you're not talking about social media push, influencers, organizations, in-person community screenings, like, get out of our face, honestly. Like, putting it up online on Apple TV or whatever on video demand and just magically people are going to watch it, that ship has sailed. I don't know if it ever worked. But it needs to be robust, and we need to think outside the box. And also, again, this is getting dumped on the filmmaker. So not only do we need to raise our $500,000 or our multi-million-dollar just for production, now you're dumping it on the filmmaker to also marketing and distribution and impact. Like, the impact strategy is a huge thing, and it's so important. But the piece that's missing in my experience from the impact strategy is that here's this money to go pay somebody else to go do this work, but oh wait, we need you, the filmmaker, to work full time on that impact campaign for no money,
Free.
for free. And it's like, yo, I got two small kids, and I'm trying to make other projects. So I don't know if this is the answer you want, but it has to be robust. It has to be like there has to be this package. And there are organizations out there that want to host your film, right? That want to bring you to their city. So thinking about this early on is what we filmmakers don't do what I did. I made a huge mistake. I was tunnel vision. We are making this film. It's going to be the most powerful thing that I could possibly create, and it's going to get on Netflix. That was my tunnel vision. It's Netflix or HBO or it's nothing. And that was such a huge mistake. Such a huge mistake. We had a 0 line item budget for marketing. So that doesn't work.
Did you want to?
I just want to say one other thing that I think is going to be the answer that a lot on one side of the political aisle won't want to hear. Part of the answer is DEI. Because to the young lady who asked about decolonizing our minds, why aren't there more Muslims, people of color, that are the gatekeepers, right? That get to decide what gets on Netflix. What DEI was trying to do was to say, we need more variety in the room, in the C-suites, when people are deciding what to greenlight, what to buy, what's worth buying, what's worth showing on these platforms. And if we're just constantly begging other people to embrace our stories, we're never in power. How do we figure out how to create the distribution outlets with the power of a Netflix, but with the faces and the backgrounds and the stories and the commitment that comes from us? Those are the coalitions. I wish those were the conversations that were happening, because the amount of money that all of our communities have that we spend on Birkin bags and on trips and on whatever, we have the money. Our spending power collectively in these communities of color it's probably $1 trillion. It's there. Who are our celebrities? Who are our people that have money and can start to build institutions? Where's our Netflix?
Yep.
So.
Thank you. It's coming. It's coming. I want to take the liberty to ask the final question and bring it back to our conversation. And again, thank you all for being on this panel today. And thank you, Sue and Salam and Habib and MPAC and everyone for facilitating today's event and the Muslim House. You know, in your film, and I'm gonna get emo because Tarek knows I told him that I cry in Frozen every time I watch it. So I was like, I'm gonna cry in your movie, which I did. I cried for an hour and a half. There's something that the parents of Yusr and Razan said after the tragedy happened that I wrote down. He said everything they were trying to do was trying to change things for the future, for their children, for their kids, for a better future. And your film is, as the daughter, as for your father, is trying to change things for the better, for the future, for as his child, for your kids. For my kids, I'm at MPAC and I do this work because I don't want my kids to face the taunting and the being called a terrorist like I was called many, many times. I don't want that future for them. And so I feel like so many of us in this room are in this work for that reason. We're trying to change things for the better, whether it's for our kids, whether it's for our planet, whether it's for you, for all the little black girls that watch TV and say, I could be that. That's so important. So as we wrap things up, I want to ask you, and on a positive note, as we look to change policy and shape policy in sort of troubling times, but I want to look to how we can better ourselves as communities. What are your sort of parting words for how we can change things for the better for our kids?
You want to start?
Go ahead.
We'll go down this way. I usually have a very unsexy answer, which is voting. I still do believe that it is our greatest civic power. We need to change the representation in Congress. It's really deteriorated in terms of quality, and I think we need to start putting more quality people in power and putting more quality people in positions. My dream is better candidates, better politicians, but also more people who go to film school to become executives, not filmmakers too, but we need some execs. We need some people who want to get in that C C-suite, break in that C-suite.
Yeah, people who look like us.
Amen.
Tarek.
I mean, pretty simple. I mean, we just need to continue to share our stories and create these inroads, and whether it's, you know, Muslim athletes or activists, and just be proud of it. And, you know, I do hope that my kids don't suffer through that same identity crisis that I did. You know, we didn't have the Christmas tree, and we prayed differently, and I, you know, I didn't know whether to be embarrassed or empowered, and now it's like, we're American. We're not Muslim or American. We're both, and we should be proud of our culture. We should be proud of the places that we come from, and there's a lot that we could share, and there's a lot that the wide audience can learn from that and appreciate.
I think of this work as a remembering. We just need to remember and embody everything that our ancestors have given us and everything that is already here, and we need to remember and remind each other of that. And that is step one. You know, remember it for yourself and then remind one another. And I think if we keep on doing that, we'll have enough in the collective consciousness. You know, we will have enough.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Tarek. Thank you, Samia. You are amazing. You are so powerful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.